It is your PrisonPlanet.tv memberships that fund so much of what we do here on this operation. And then we're more than happy for the TV show after it's aired live, then be leaked out onto the web to tens of millions of people. That's our goal. We are transmitting worldwide. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is Tuesday, the 6th day of March 2012. On this Tuesday edition, we're going to be here for the next 3 hours. We have David Icke, love him, hate him, certainly an icon of opening up your mind and not trusting the system. He will be joining us in the second hour today to talk about Iran, the open world government. In 2012, Bruce Fein, who is the chief advisor on policy to Congressman Ron Paul, presidential candidate, will be joining us for 1 hour in the third hour. And I will take calls for both men today. In the balance of the time we have here, Obama shifts location of G8 summit from hometown of Chicago to his Camp David retreat. That tells me they're looking very strongly at having the war with Iran. That's a high security facility and area during that period, just like they launched the attack on Russian-held areas in Georgia during 8/88 when all the world leaders were together in China for the Olympics. They tend to do things like this only when there's about to be a war. In fact, Camp David is the #1 alternate government site after D.C. And then #2 site is, of course, alternates between Site R in Maryland and Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, there in Colorado Springs, and that ties into an underground government complex. The real long-term Northcom command center government is in Colorado, but their alternate meeting places, the underground shadow government system is based in Colorado more than anywhere else. But it's got constellations in Maryland, in Virginia, in Texas, in California, and many other areas. But I'm getting into COG technicalities. The point is, the fact that they're moving it to this high security facility with underground railways under it and the rest of it. Oh, I'm not supposed to know that? That got the NSA going right there. The fact that all of that's happening there and that they're going to have all the world leaders at Camp David means get ready for something big. And there's the headlines here. Benjamin Netanyahu declares war. That's basically what his AIPAC speech was on Iran. Headline, Israel reserves the right to strike. My supreme responsibility as Prime Minister of Israel is to ensure that Israel remains the master of its fate. I thought fate's like bad connotation. You mean master of its destiny? You notice all this is happening as the world hurtles into depression, as world governments openly announce. This giant war that's being prepared is the political distraction. That they need to clamp down domestically. And it's going to help the mullahs as well. They want to hold on to power. They don't care if their country gets bombed or wrecked. That will actually keep them in power. And, hey, Iran is up to the Iranian people. I don't dislike Iran. I admire their science and culture. Same thing with Israel. People are people. And I just want to get the parasitic elites that all behave and act the same out of control of our society. And how is that going to happen? That's going to start to happen when we start being involved in the political process and really being wise and informed and involved. The people perish for lack of knowledge. And evil people love war, It is the health of the state. It is the health of tyranny. War is the health of oppression and despotism. It is the health of the strong man, the king rat. All right, that's only the tip of the iceberg. Homeland Security, now going to be on the campuses. Just huge news today. It is all coming up. Big news from the campaign trail as well. I'm Alex Jones. Stay with me. This is going to be an incredible transmission today. Thank you so much for joining us. It is Tuesday, the 6th of March, 2012. David Icke on the Open World Government 2012 and more will be joining us in the second hour. Always interesting, always thought-provoking. Bruce Fine, the head policy advisor, chief policy advisor to Congressman Ron Paul, constitutional lawyer par excellence, will be joining us coming up in the third hour. We'll have open phones for both men. Okay, wow. All over the Washington Post, all over the New York Times, all over everywhere. They're saying, yeah, we will kill citizens overseas. The Attorney General says, and we have the power to kill citizens here domestically, but we won't right now. So it's just part of the acclimating you. Yeah, you heard due process was important, and if government starts secretly killing people, it's a problem. Yeah, you thought the bill was bad for secret arrest. Well, actually, we'll just kill you. And so the media is kind of like, hey, you know, the corporate whore media is like, this is pretty good. Actually, this is how they keep us safe. Anybody who they say is a threat to the state or the president in any way to national security, and that means mega banks ruling America and looting and robbing us from every angle. Anybody that tries to dislodge the criminal enterprise that runs our country in any way is a threat to the nation, because the nation isn't America anymore. It's a banker holding. We're kind of like a person that a vampire keeps in a closet to just go in occasionally and have snacks on. It's like that movie Coma or something. They just use us for, you know, body parts for the empire. They have us all jacked in, just slowly sucking our blood at their leisure. And so that's what's going on. And now I've got all these articles where they're like, well, yeah, we won't just secretly arrest you. We'll kill you. We'll secretly arrest you in America, but not kill you in America. But if you're a citizen overseas, anywhere, we'll kill you, and we'll bomb any country we want, worldwide declaration of war. And you heard Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, who ran the anti-Bin Laden program and could have killed him in 2001 and 2000 and was ordered not to, say that Anwar al-Awlaki is a FBI asset. Now, of course, that's even in Fox News. That got leaked. The Pentagon did not deny it a few years ago. AP, Fox News picked it up and just dryly said, you know, Anwar al-Awlaki was Pentagon dinner guest with the Secretary of the Army. And, of course, he was born in America. So was Adam Perlman. Of the 5 leaders of al-Qaeda who they jockey and say who's number one, 4 of them were born in America and on record trained at Langley, and just absolute intelligence operatives who in American production quality videos say, we're going to attack you dirty Americans. I mean, it's so ridiculous that it makes your head spin. The underwear bomber, the Fort Hood shooter, the Times Square bomber. I mean, look this up. And you heard Colonel Schaefer say yes yesterday. That's all true. And again, he's a credible, well-known, best-selling author, government think tanks. He's telling you this. Imagine what he's really thinking. Imagine what the rest of the good people in the Pentagon who are compartmentalized, people like Fletcher Prouty was, who was exposing the fact that the government had killed Kennedy. He was in the type of position that Colonel Schaefer was. He was the liaison between the Pentagon and the CIA and Black Ops, running assassinations and overthrows worldwide. They literally told him, you're going to the North Pole this week, and you're not to be in contact with any of your sources for the next 2 weeks. And he'd never had that happen. He went, oh. And they're like, yeah. They had troops ready for riot control that day that went on alert that the president hadn't authorized. The day before they kill him. I mean, it just goes on and on. The Secret Service pulling security off of him, saying you're going to go in the open car, pulling the security off. I mean, it goes on and on. They even had a Secret Service agent, you can look him up, in Chicago, who went public the week before and said they're going to kill you in Chicago when you're motorcade, and that's why they had to pull out of Chicago. They were planning to kill him in Miami, as he says in his deathbed confession, E. Howard Hunt, who was the Ethan Hunt of Mission Impossible, the writers of that back in the 60s, the TV show. It was based on E. Howard Hunt, who'd been a sniper in World War II and just had, kills off the chart and everything else. And was the head of black op murder squads. I mean, overthrowing more than 10 countries. And would go in and command forces, killing people, killing presidents, killing prime ministers, overthrowing. And he's like, yeah, Cordmeyer came and they went. Of course, it was being run out of the White House under LBJ, and the COINTELPRO attacked and said, he's saying LBJ didn't go higher. No. In the command structure, the quarterback, or really the coach, he said I was a bench warmer commanding it. In that operation, knew that his chain of command went to the president. Of course it goes above that. But that just shows how straw man attacks are built. Whenever we drop huge bombshells and break them here, there's always attacks on it to discredit it and attack it because they don't want the public realizing how powerful these jewels of information are. They don't want the people knowing just how huge all of this information really is. But I digress. They are now saying that, yeah, we'll kill Americans and secretly arrest Americans anywhere in the world except the U.S., and we'll secretly arrest you here if we want. Now, I later learned, and my office was contacted by G20 Security a few years ago when Rob Dew was up in Pittsburgh and got arrested. We were contacted. We checked the number in the phone system, called them back. They confirmed, but wouldn't come on air, that when we linked to the video of protesters and troops in uniforms jumping out with no insignia, grabbing people, you can just type in snatch and grab at G20. Same thing happened in Canada, same thing in England. They grab people and shove them in cars. And I said on air, that guy looks like a role player. Turns out G20 Security called me from the number and wouldn't say who they were other than the first name and said, that was G20 Security, not U.S. military, and that was a simulation, but that's all we're going to tell you. And because they wanted it put out, it was a simulation. But why all over the world now at these G20 events and other events do they have black vans pull up or Crown Vics pull up with people in military outfits to grab you and throw you in a vehicle? They're priming the pump. It's a beta test. Can we start pulling up and grabbing people? It's all an acclamation. Now, we found out who was out there, and since I've learned it wasn't just State Guard, there was also National Guard at the Kite Festival, troops used for crowd control at Texas Kite Festival. Now, this is giant Zilker Park, hundreds of access points. There's no way you're going to stop terrorists from going in there. A terrorist just drives up and shoots the troops if they were a real terrorist. That's not CIA or Mossad or other groups run. British intelligence run. Remember, we always forget, in Basra, you guys get me a water, please, thanks. Been having a scratchy throat. In Basra, thank you. In Basra, they caught British Special Forces in 2006, dressed up with fake beards, posing as Wahhabists, driving around shooting Sunni, Shiite, police officers and others to get a sectarian war going. They were caught by the Iraqi police. This all happened. So this is what full spectrum dominance is. You have to create the enemy. Now, continuing, I know I harp on this a lot because it's everything. We're told give up all our rights, all of our liberties, change our whole way of life. The big news is they're moving the G8 summit from Chicago to Camp David because it is a black site, a secret government site. I mean, the surface level structures are on record, but it is a continuity of government COG, /1 designate, auxiliary Congress meeting, cabinet meeting facility. The real shadow government command base is Colorado Springs / Denver complex. Just to give you a factoid there from our deep research, but that, by the way, that's all on record. Just details are classified. that signifies that they do think war is going to happen with Iran. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. Kind of like somebody takes the safety off, puts a gun to your head. They're intending to pull the trigger. Are they going to change their mind in the next 5 seconds, politically? Maybe. Netanyahu's given his American-Israeli affairs speech, and it's basically a declaration of war. He says, my supreme responsibility as Prime Minister of Israel is to ensure that Israel remains the master of its fate. And then meanwhile, all over the country, TSA is showing up at bus stations, highways, train stations, and groping and grabbing and teaching everybody that there's total federalization, unbonded, unsworn, not even peace officers. They're not even federal out of their jurisdiction. It's just total lawlessness. Just like Obama launching the war without Congress. Colonel Schaefer had to admit, he said it is treason. It is illegal. Just on its face, 100%. It's like, is it legal to grab a kid out of their front yard, tie him down on the road, and run over him? Yes, it's illegal. Is it illegal to walk up to somebody you don't know and shoot him in the head with a shotgun? Yes, it's illegal. I mean, there's no debating that it's illegal. Launching wars against Libya, launching proxy wars against Syria, all of this, without congressional approval, totally illegal. TSA and Homeland Security are now going to be on campuses nationwide advising students and professors about threats. Oh, we're just here. We're just spies. We're just here to get everybody paranoid and create a spying grid. It's all the Stasi system. And TV screens going in Walmart saying, watch your neighbor, blimps flying around, 30,000 drones. I remember 7 years ago when they first saw the robotic dragonflies, I thought I was crazy when people were reporting it. And then later, 6 months later, oh yeah, those are Homeland Security robot dragonflies. I mean, we're not in Kansas anymore. Here it is, Big Sis and DHS move on to campus. It is not a federal occupation. It's a banker occupation through the puppet government. That's what happens to me a lot on air, is I read all this news and information, the image is so clear, the threat's so obvious that I just throw a fit. It's really a form of laziness, but I am too close to this sometimes, but we all are, and we live in the present. The past is forever the past. The future is hurtling towards us. You've got to fight tyranny while the sun still shines, because the sun is setting. A great time of darkness is upon us, but it has to get dark for people to recognize what good is again. We have to go into bondage, just like Israel did over and over again every time it turned its back on God, to discover the blessings. And if the people will repent and change their evil ways, if you don't believe in God, this is corruption, this is decadence, this is silliness, this is laziness, this is madness. What the elites are doing with fission fusion reactors, hadron colliders, nuclear weapons, neutron bombs, antimatter weapons they admit they've developed, but details remain classified. San Francisco Chronicle, AP. We cover that in New World Order, Blueprint of Madmen. By the way, that's free on the web now. PrisonPlanet.tv viewers got it first last week, but it's free on the web. Hope you appreciate it. I don't think it's pearls before swine. Some folks are like, man, don't release this right now. Only have it on PrisonPlanet.tv, and we'll get a lot more members. Then you could actually pay to hire more people and do a bigger, better job. And I'm like, I understand that school of thought. We try to have both worlds where the members get it first, get it in higher quality. We have our own system, so we can't be censored. But I would rather reach hundreds of millions of people online with the films than just be a pure subscription system and, reach a few 100,000. And it wouldn't even be a few 100,000 if I didn't let people share their passcode with 6 people to do it. But it's a side issue if you want to be a PrisonPlanet.tv member and support us. It's 15 cents a day. We have a 15-day free trial running just perpetually, so you can go check it out and take advantage of it. All the films are there. My book, Paul Watson's book, 9 years of material. In April, it'll be 9 years. Everything. Expanded extras, expanded stuff that's not on the DVDs. Every TV show going back 5 years now. Old TV shows I did 13, 14 years ago. In fact, I've got a program soon. We've got to go through all the tapes. A new program I want to launch once a week is clips from old shows from 15, 16, 17 years ago. But there is prisonplanet.tv. We do have David Icke steaming towards us. He'll be with us in T-minus 40 minutes, 40 seconds. And then, of course, Bruce Fine, chief advisor for the campaign on policy, chief policy advisor, Bruce Fine, constitutional lawyer, about the cartoon-level tyranny. Now, again, they're announcing all these unconstitutional powers and trying to implement them, but fully implementing them is another story altogether. But I got to tell you, they are actually getting a lot of it done, and it's horrifying. I wish I would have done more when I first woke up. I wish I knew then what I know now. I wish people understood how much danger they're in, and that cowering to this ensures. It'd be like if you were in the Carpathian Mountains 300 years ago and a pack of 15 wolves was following you. I'll assure you that if you just grovel in fear and let it paralyze you and collapse, down in the bushes, they're going to come and eat you. But if you try to climb a tree, try to get to high ground, try to make a fire, try to find a cabin, try to find other people, you're gonna make it, or at least die trying. But if I've seen this a lot I know you've seen it in crime videos they release out of shopping mall parking lots or security camera inside stores or people's houses, where men and women will collapse in fear of just a person in their house who hadn't even pulled a weapon out yet and will do what they say. And I don't think of myself as somebody special, but I actually have been mugged repeatedly in Dallas. And let me tell you, they ended up getting hurt real bad. And call that reckless, but I couldn't do anything but automatically feign that I was listening to them and then assaulting them with ferocious, high-powered, destructive, bone-crushing delivery. Because that's what I'm designed to do. You've got to have that in you as well. Believe me, I got my butt stomped plenty of times. I'm not the toughest guy around, far from it. There are people out there so fast, so mean, that it'll make your head spin. Who are these people here today? What are we turning into? I've told the story 50 times. I won't tell it again, just in brevity, but I come out of the bathroom, a woman's choking, she's turning blue. This has been going on for 2 minutes. Everyone's saying like parrots, call 911, call 911. They've all got their cell phones out. This is like 10 years ago. And I start saying, do the Heimlich maneuver. And they're like, no, police, ambulance. No. It was all these men like, no, like these metrosexual men and these women like parrots going 911, 911. I mean, that's the essence of everything, just chirping 911 over and over again. So I said, no, I'm going to do the Heimlich. And by then she's like starting to get on the table. And all, so I get over there like, you're going to get in trouble. Be careful. Are you licensed for this? And I, do the Heimlich a few times. She was a little bit overweight. I actually had to pick her up almost. Boom, coughs the bread out. But the point is that out of a restaurant, I mean, there had to be 25, 30 people in that wing of the La Madeleine restaurant. And I don't tell that story over and over again because I'm a hero doing a Heimlich. It was nothing. I mean, if I'm choking, I want somebody to help me. I guess I know how to do it on a chair. I guess if you're by yourself, I know how to do it on babies because I've got children. And when I was swimming at the YMCA back when I was a kid, I took the basic fire department one. And when I had children, the first thing I did was go, refresh myself on the internet with how to do it. I even thought about going out to the fire department and taking one of the courses to refresh. I should have. I didn't. Because I wanted to know how to resuscitate my children if they were in the water. I wanted to know how to do the Heimlich on a baby. And there's different ways. You just put them on their stomach in your hand and then, kind of bump them that way. There's different ways to do it. The point is that that's weird. I've learned that I would want to know how to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. I mean, I know how to jumpstart a car. I want to know how to jumpstart a person. That's like weird nowadays. That's like, whoa. You call 911 for that. Well, sorry, 911 on average takes about 11 minutes. Sometimes the cops do a great job and show up in 30 seconds. But I want to know how to do the Heimlich. I want to know how to do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. I want to know how to jumpstart somebody's heart. Hit them in the chest if I need to, if mouth-to-mouth doesn't work. And my country is dying in front of me, too. And I'm like, I don't have the power to resuscitate this republic. You've got to get awake. You've got to get upset. You've got to realize how much danger you're in. It's on record the government shipped guns into Mexico to blame the Second Amendment and killed thousands. Hundreds on this side. But they got corrected yesterday in some comments. I've been saying 3 Border Patrol, 3 police officers for like 2 years. It's like 10 now conservatively dead from those guns traced directly just on our side of the border. Over 200 U.S. citizens estimated. Thousands. The Mexican government estimates 2,000. I think that's conservative. Of the 40-plus thousand traced directly to guns shipped in by the ATF. They didn't just let them leave the store. That was the cover. They put out in the news the limited part when it came out in federal filings. So they said, we'll just give them the smallest part and make it all about that. It's a basic psychological warfare. I had Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer on yesterday, who ran the bin Laden program trying to kill him, who was blocked twice from killing him. And he said, I agree with you. They're letting terrorists attack us and funding terrorists so they can take our liberties. This is a guy who has had the highest security clearances you can get. Part of prestigious government think tanks, correspondent on all the big networks, and he point blank says, no, you're right. The elites are funding it so they can take our liberties, and Amaral Awlaki, without me prompting him, is a FBI asset. And that's why they had the staged killing of him. They didn't kill him. He's been sheep-dipped. Just like they did with special forces. Oh, they died in a helicopter crash. Yeah, right. Changed their identity, everything. That's declassified. They've been doing that since the 40s. In fact, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut at that point. But the issue here is that it's a fact that 4 of the 5 leaders of al-Qaeda work for the U.S. government on record and were born here in the United States. And you're like, well, so there isn't Muslim extremists? Of course there is. Who do you think commands them? They'll find people that really do want to blow stuff up and hurt people, but they're almost always led by British, Israeli, U.S., or Saudi forces who all stand to gain. You got to love it. 15 of the 19 hijackers are from Saudi Arabia, but we attack Iraq. And now they're announcing TSA all over the country. And it's in the news now. People are like, wow, how'd you know this? It's in Forbes. It's in Dallas Morning News. They're just everywhere. I'm getting calls every day now. Oh, my gosh, I'm in this town of only 20,000, and there was TSA out there on the street corner directing the police. Oh, my gosh, I went to a middle school basketball game, Alex. We're talking 200 people. People send me the videos. They're all over YouTube every day now. Not every week. Now it's every day. And they come and there's like regular army with sidearms at the basketball game in New Mexico or Connecticut. And then I see the photos on the Marine Corps site, the local base, or the Army site. It's always different. And it shows always like a 3-year-old opening their Hello Kitty bag, and the troops are searching it like it's cute and fun. And they had the Texas Guard and National Guard. The only press release we could find, but we talked to some others, it was National Guard there as well, directing people and reportedly checking things and putting kids on school buses. And they're like, oh, you're just being paranoid. They want to take you to a FEMA camp. It's a drill for that. What's to acclimate the troops and everybody that, yeah, we drive buses, we put kids on them. We take kids in. You're part of a community program, helping the poor kids. All sounds reasonable. Until you read Army Times, until you read all these mainline publications where they said, we're just getting to know the public, Stars and Stripes, and we're like 4 years ago, we're just letting everybody know we're here to help them with our assets. And so, Jaws of Life cut somebody out in South Dakota. Helicopter flies 100 miles with the Jaws of Life. Army helicopter lands, cuts you out. It's on the news. Army helping, winning the hearts, and we're being acclimated for occupation. And it says in the articles, they're acclimating us in a friendly way. And then, in the same article in Army Times, but it was Brigade Homeland starts tour, and then the date. They actually pulled it out of there like a week later after we made a big deal of it. But it had the colonel in there going, yeah, we're here to help Jaws alive, car wrecks, drunk driving checkpoints, and sadly, it's got to be done. We're preparing to pull triggers on the American people. Pull triggers. It got saved on the web before they removed that part. But then I was given in 98, because the FBI pulled up Mike Hansen. It's in Takeover. He was driving up to Waco to do a roofing job. He had a a construction company on the side, along with doing camera work for me, volunteering like once a week or so. And he also worked part-time sometimes. The point is, Mike calls me. I was doing my daytime show. I was doing daytime and nighttime. Then he says, yeah, there's Army out here searching Greyhound buses. And then the FBI pulls up and comes over and says, get out of here. Here's the press release. Stop trying to videotape this. It's national security. And it turned out they gave us a secret document. By the grace of God, the FBI guy's like, get out of here. And of course, Mike didn't go. There's footage. First the police come up and say, get out of here. Was it Sergeant Smart? Thought that was funny, like out of a movie, the name of the police officer. Was it Captain Smart? The point is, and they start parking dump trucks in front of them just so we couldn't see it. Or not, it was a drill. And then a year later, 2 years later, we're in an urban warfare drill, and the troops come up. They've got Marines, Army, you name it. And they come over and they go, turn your cameras off. This is in Belton, Texas. You're not supposed to videotape us. And I said, I'll videotape it. And he goes, it's you. Because he'd seen the film, I guess. You're not supposed to videotape me. I'm EOD and all this stuff. But anyways, the document they gave us on the side of the highway said, classified, restricted. We're here, with your police departments everywhere. We're here to counter-respond, 365 days a year, 7 days a week, anytime. We're here for whatever you need, warrant service, bomb disposal. Folks, they've got troops raiding houses everywhere. And the chief of police was in here a few months ago, and he's like, the world would literally have to be ending to have troops in Austin, Alex. Really? Art Acevedo? Okay, then. Why are there National Guard and state troops, state guard, out there at the Kite Festival? Pow! Folks, wait till you see this Dave Mustaine interview. I was going to release it like Friday on the Nightly News, but I'm going to take our time and release it next week. Because he said he talked about a lot of stuff in this interview he's never said. And it was his idea, so it's going to be powerful. Okay, continuing here. Let me just read to you the headlines that are here in front of me in this short segment. Troops used for crowd control at Texas Kite Festival. Footage shows guard troops loading children onto school buses, and there's a whole admitted program to take kids during emergencies using the Army, and we've got links to all the mainstream articles about that. Just all to acclimate everybody, including the military. And we get the internal documents. It's about war against us. But, the troops have been here before. Big Sis and DHS move onto campuses. Surveillance operation on campuses, Homeland Security, actually recruiting the students to spy on each other. Go read that, Infowars.com. Fort Worth Star Telegram, some say re-election fears is driving gun sales in Fort Worth and elsewhere. Here's a NBC report, nationwide, even topping the record sales of last year. And people say, we know the government's criminal, we don't trust it. So, hey, good luck, military, if you follow these orders. Just know this, when they blow up your bases or whatever and say the Ron Paul supporters did it, you better believe that the criminal banks that run the country did it. They're trying to get us to have a civil war. So get your cameras rolling quick when the feds attack the military or federal bases. Because it's not going to be the American people. You're an American too, and you're about to lose your whole future. We've got them checkmated, though. Even if they go ahead with all this, we have damaged them so bad exposing their whole program that people already think we're psychic because everything we've talked about is coming true. Imagine if they go to the next phase and everything comes true like we said. I mean, don't you get it? We loaded time bombs into this thing that aren't explosive. They're info weapon. They're not physical. We're devastating you, and you know it. And the more you do what we said you're going to do, the more you are going to be exposed. But they're committed. And so the die is cast, the collision course. Netanyahu to Obama. Israel reserves the right to strike. Goes on to say it's his supreme responsibility as prime minister to Israel to ensure that Israel remains the master of its fate. I always call him the president. He's the prime minister. And Bibi's declaration of war on Iran is another good article breaking it all down. Very serious information on that front. And again, what really signifies they're going towards war here is that they're moving the G8 from Chicago to Camp David, which is a continuity of government site. They do not want this out in the open, and that shows me they like to launch wars while these conferences are going on. And so that could be it. The White House abruptly announced yesterday that it had scuttled plans to hold the upcoming G8 economic summit in Chicago and would instead host the world leaders at the presidential retreat in Camp David in Maryland. It was an unusually late location change for a large and highly scripted international summit and came with little explanation from the White House. Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, the former White House chief of staff who personally lobbied President Obama to have the summit in Chicago, was informed only hours before the announcement. That's May 18th and 19th. Man, I'm telling you, this is hardcore. Wow. And later I want to go over this with David Icke when he joins us. 15 potentially massive threats to the U.S. economy over the next 12 months. The big one's the Iran situation, the collapse of Spain, the disorderly Greek default. State and local governments are imploding. I mean, it's just crazy. Another big article out of ABC News, green firms get fed cash, give execs bonuses, fail. Yeah, all by design. It's just pure criminal looting. Eurozone economy shrinks to fourth quarter as recession fears mount. It's a depression by design. That's just some of what we're going to be going over coming up. Also, FBI is looking at probes of News Corps all over the world, not just here. I'm telling you, the FBI run by arch criminals, Obama, engaged in treason. We have high-level Army officers on saying, I'm sorry, it is treason, it is illegal. They're guaranteed risking his name, life, everything. I mean, that's what it is. You're seeing absolute lawlessness, and now they're talking about arresting Rupert Murdoch to shut down the media. And oh, it's bad news. All right, for the next hour, we are joined by the one, the only David Icke, a champion goalie, sports and news reporter, formerly the head of the Green Party in the UK, who had a massive awakening experience 20 years ago now or more. And a lot of what he's talked about, unfortunately, has come true. You know, David was asking us in an email, well, what are some of the points Alex wants to raise? And, you know, I never even really do that with David Icke because he's always got the points he thinks are most important, and I always tend to agree with him. I want to get into just the hurdling crisis, the openness of world government now, with the banksters running it, the NDAA, the open announcement of secret police, wars without approval, just total lawlessness out in the open. And there is, what he predicted and others did as well, a giant accelerating awakening happening. So we are living in an incredible time, to say the least. We are at the crossroads of human destiny. DavidIcke.com is his website. Also, I'll be plugging this throughout. He is coming to the United States, speaking at 2 events in Hawaii this month, in Honolulu, all day on March 24th, and Maui, all day on March 31st. He has a new book out called Remember Who You Are. And he joins us now. We're going to break in about 3 minutes, David. But give us a prelude. What are some of the biggest things on your radar screen right now?
Well, first of all, it would be nice while I'm in Hawaii, if I can find Obama's birth certificate. I shall be looking as best I can, but I'm not confident. Funnily enough, I think one of the most relevant things that gets missed a lot of the time is that you currently have the President of the United States visiting you. He's just arrived in America. He's there now. He's called Benjamin Netanyahu. And this whole area of how what I call Rothschild Zionists, which is not Jewish people over in total, it's this, what I would strongly suggest, Alex, is a secret society at its core, created and controlled to this day by the Rothschilds, that has taken over American government through organizations, not least AIPAC, and by putting their people in the key positions to control finance, to control the State Department, to control all these areas that are pushing and pushing and pushing for this agenda that you've just been talking about. I mean, someone like Joseph Lieberman, for instance, Rothschild Zionist, again and again comes up to articulate and try to promote things that are in the agenda, not least, of course, in his case, censorship of the internet. And this is an area that we really, you know, need to stop hiding from and pussyfooting around, because this is not about it's Jewish people. No, it's a secret society, which is not entirely Jewish people either. As one of the few things that Joe Biden has ever said that I agree with is when he said you don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. No, you don't. People like John McCain are Zionists in my definition of that, and they push that agenda.
Why do you think Israel wants war, or some of the interest over there want war so bad?
Well, because you know, what we have, and we've got a break shortly, but what we have is a global structure, Alex, which is akin to a transnational corporation. If you look at something like McDonald's, it will have a headquarters somewhere in the world, well, in America in this case. And in each country around the world, McDonald's will have subsidiaries like other transnational corporations, and those subsidiaries are there to carry out and introduce the policies and the direction and the agenda of the headquarters.
And take over the next country. Those countries that are controlled are then go into the exploitation phase to be a launch base to attack the next nation. They're basically like aircraft carriers on land. Well, we'll stay there. Let's come back and explore this, because I said grab bag. I had no idea what you'd bring up. This first, we'll get into that, and then we'll get into all the rest of the things that are happening. We are 8 minutes in to this second hour of worldwide broadcast. It is March 6th, 2012. Beware the Ides of March. We've seen the untimely death of Andrew Breitbart, where we're seeing Obama announce that he will kill U.S. citizens overseas, but only secretly arrest them here, launching wars without congressional approval. Benjamin Netanyahu just came to the United States, and basically I watched part of the speech online. I didn't watch it live, but I watched part of it online this morning, and it basically sounded like a declaration of war, like it's a foregone conclusion. And I had Colonel Schaefer on yesterday. He said it's starting to lean towards that. Will it be an October surprise or after the election, because the gas prices will go up? Then that'll be used as a political diversion for the open announcement of world government run by megabanks. Now, David Icke just joined us in the last little segment. If you tuned in, I said out of all the things, Iran, the economy, world government, the drones, the microchipping, what's most on your radar? Because I don't do a pre-interview with David. He's busy, I'm busy. I just want to hear what he has to say. And he brought up the fact that Israel and some of the things that are going on there being very close to the core of this and tying it into the Rothschilds. So go ahead, David.
Well, what I was saying, Alex, is that this global network, this global cabal of families and secret societies operates like a transnational corporation. A transnational corporation, I was saying, has a headquarters somewhere in the world, and then the subsidiaries in each country carry out the agenda and the policies dictated from the center. So, for instance, if you go into a McDonald's in Moscow or Johannesburg or Sydney or New York, you're going into basically the same McDonald's. Well, what this cabal has created is a secret society and family bloodline, a version of that, where the headquarters at operational level certainly is in Europe. It's in places like the City of London, in Paris, in Rome, and Brussels, places like that. In America, yes, to an extent, but nothing like as much as you'd think, considering how powerful and upfront America has been in the public arena. And so when you look at names like the United States, Israel even, Britain, these are just names for subsidiaries of the global network, and they're working to a central dictated plan. And
that's why there's global standardization. I mean, it's the same system across the board.
So look what's happening here. The Rothschilds created modern Israel, and as many Jewish historians have written at length about, there is no historical justification for it. The Rothschilds know that. So what they did was create Israel for a specific reason, nothing to do with Jewish people. They hung them out to dry in Germany. They're planning to hang them out to dry again in this planned Third World War. They couldn't give a damn about Jewish people in general, and it's about time Jewish people in general started to realize this, because they've been had by these people. They have no more concern for them as they have for the rest of the population. So Israel's there to create upheaval, divide and rule, and agitation in that crucial part of the world as part of a much greater global plan. So you have Israel doing that. And Israel is an arm of the Rothschilds, just as the United States and Britain are arms of the Rothschilds. And this is why America gives so much fantastic amounts of billions of dollars every year to Israel, this sliver of land in the Middle East, which has a population of little more, if even that, of 8 million people. And the reason they do that is because one arm of the Rothschilds, the American government, is handing that money from American taxpayers and borrowing to another arm of the Rothschilds, the Israeli government. And it doesn't go to the Israeli people. In September of 2011, something like 400,000 Jewish people, Israelis, were on the streets in Israel protesting against their treatment and their economic plight, just as the same was happening around in other parts of the world.
Well, David, just to add...
400,000 people in a country of less than 8 million. So it's not going to Jewish people. It's going to the cabal that control Israel. Then you take it to the next stage. When you've got the agitation and the manipulation, then in comes the American military overwhelmingly. They're now calling it NATO because they're moving towards the world army step by step in this way. But overwhelmingly, NATO is America. Now, why is it that at a time when so many Americans are in such terrible economic plights, when you are having enormous numbers of people losing their jobs, losing their homes, losing their livelihoods, that if you add all the hidden costs in, the American government is still spending, borrowing, and using taxpayers' money to the tune of something like $1 trillion a year.
It's more than that.
On military spending. Yeah, probably more.
No, it's almost $2 trillion because it's 1.1 on budget, another 800 billion that's supplemental. But let me just stop you and back you up here.
Hold on a second. One second. That makes my point even stronger. Where I'm going with this is that is not the American military. That is the cabal's military called America, and this is why it doesn't serve the interests of Americans, certainly not with these cuckoo land amounts of money being spent on slaughtering people abroad.
Sure, America is used as a subsidiary, but listen, I got to throw this at you because you're absolutely right, and you've talked about this forever. The Rothschilds, as you know, 1215, when Napoleon said he'd won to buy up the stock market when it crashed, and then it went back up. That's all on record, but they sued the Mail and then lost. The Mail said, the big paper said, you are a secret, mastermind, puppet master, secretly running all these oligarchs and banks. And I'd seen that from research. And then he sued them, and then it came out, the judge said that they'd lied to him, Nathan Rothschild had, and that indeed he was this puppet master. So I wanted to throw that at you to get your take on it.
Well, the House of Rothschild are one of the major expressions of this bloodline network. And what they've done brilliantly in the last 100 and odd years from the turn of the 20th century is to increase their power, increase their economic power and political manipulative power, while appearing to have faded into the background. What they do is they put people forward like Goldman Sachs and Lloyd Blankfein and people like this to do their work in the public arena.
By the way, got to back you up. I've seen in like big establishment publications that are more for elites, it says like the word Rothschild means discretion and secrecy, and that's even admitted. So why do you think he sued the Mail, for a newspaper, for reporting something that's well known?
Well, only he knows that, but he made a big mistake, that's for sure. And maybe the tide is starting to turn. I think it is. I think there are signs that it is, because the Rothschilds now are increasingly finding it more and more difficult to hide behind anonymity.
Well, that was why I asked the question now, is what does that signify that the court ruled against him?
Well, I think, Alex, I am seeing more and more signs, not kind of great revelations that change society yet, but I am seeing signs that the tide is beginning to turn. But as I was saying, Netanyahu, therefore, just like the American military is serving the Rothschilds' agenda, so Netanyahu is serving the Rothschilds' agenda, so Obama is serving the Rothschild agenda, so David Cameron's serving the Rothschild agenda, and the Rothschild agenda is for a series of domino takeovers and wars in the Middle East, leading to a third world war between NATO and the so-called West and Russia and China. So all these people are not operating, I mean, listeners to this show will know this, but they're not operating at random and making up as they go along. This is part of a plan, and the Rothschilds are orchestrating.
Wesley Clark said that years ago. He said he was in there, and they said, we're going to attack these countries in this order, and it's now happening. It is all a program.
Yeah, this is what people need to appreciate to start to see the world in the way that it is, as opposed to the movie that we're sold through the mainstream media and through politics. That is, the borders that we see as divisions between countries, divisions between units of nation, are only applicable on the surface. Behind the scenes, the same cabal is manipulating into all these different countries. So at the peak of their pyramids, that cabal in each country that runs the politics, the banking, etc., is answering to the same master.
Sure, compartmentalization. We're about to go to break, but I want to ask you this. How is it going for them? From everything I've seen, it's not going well, but they've still got the momentum to try to carry it out.
Well, I've been feeling for a while, Alex, a sense of panic. And when you panic, you make mistakes. And when you panic, you tend to be unable to keep under wraps what you're doing. And I'm seeing this happening more and more and more. On one level, they are pushing on and on and on, but they're pushing on. I have been saying this for years, and all this Orwellian extremism that's coming in, it's because it's a defense mechanism overwhelmingly to the awakening of the people, which they knew was coming and they now know is really gathering more and more momentum. It's no accident, Alex, or coincidence. I mean, goodness me, what are the chances of it? That at the very time, demonstrably, more and more people from all walks of life, people who would have laughed at this not long ago, are opening their minds to a new vision of the world at the very same time that this Orwellian extremism is getting more and more extreme. It's because it's a defense mechanism. They're terrified of humanity waking up, because the only way they've been able to enslave humanity up to this point is humanity being asleep to what's going on. That's changing, and that's why they're worried, and that's why they're panicking, and that's why they're trying to push this agenda on faster and faster and faster, because they know there's a point when a humanity will have awakened enough for the game to be over.
All right, stay there. You know, I talked to a very prominent person in entertainment a few days ago, and he openly told me, he said, I was talking to one of these top elitists, and I should have asked him if I could talk about it on record without saying the name, and the elitist said to him, we're only letting you live. We just admitted the Illuminati to him. All right, I want to segue into the open world government being announced, the militarization of police, everything that David and others have talked about unfolding. So where does he see things going now that our credibility just rises and rises and rises? But on the issue of Israel, I want to be nuanced about this, because this is my real feelings and research on it. I, of course, you know, learn stuff all the time. I have researched this over the years, and of course I was naive early on, because I'm somebody who never gets into any racial stuff, tribal stuff, mafia stuff, any of this. I just am about liberty and freedom, and all humans, you know, are good and bad. But on the Israel subject, really studying it, and the mainline history books that have been written, that the Rothschilds actually helped at many levels keep Jews in Germany, wouldn't let them immigrate anywhere but Israel before Israel was set up again. You have the ringworm children, over 110,000 Jewish children, microwaved, fried, a lot of them killed by the Israeli government, along with the U.S. government. So this eugenics agenda is targeting everybody. I mean, Jewish people don't get a memo, hey, don't take vaccines, it's going to give you Crohn's. They don't get a memo, hey, don't drink the fluoride. You know, 99%, like you said, it's hiding within, you know, Jewish religion, some of it hiding within patriotism for Israel. And, you know, the average Jew I talk to is totally unaware of this. But again, and I don't see it as as even the heart of this program being, about Israel or about, Jewish religion or any of that, but it is one of the central spokes to it. In the final equation, David, this is a system that wants to destroy everybody. And I think you were getting at that, but you cannot deny that the Rothschilds are right at the center of it and then used. I mean, I know you 15 years ago never talked about Israel or Jewish stuff, and you would be attacked and say, you're really being anti-Semitic with code words. I get attacked. So I get attacked by the Nazis. I get attacked by the ADL, Israeli operative groups, because the system wants us to fight with each other. Do you see where I'm going with this, David?
It's all part of the divide and rule. This is the thing that we need to do as a human race. Those that were on the streets of Israel, 400,000 and more, those who have been on the streets of New York, of Britain, of Greece, Australia, all over the world, we need to realize that the force that we are protesting against, whether it's the Israeli government, the Australian government, whatever, is the same force. They're just different masks on the same global face. And the Israelis and the government and hierarchy and the Rothschilds, etc., have just as much absolute contempt for the mass of Jewish people as they have for everyone else. And this is an interesting thing that a lot of people don't realize, is that the first Zionist Congress was held in Basel, Switzerland in the latter years of the 19th century. But that's not where it was supposed to have been held to start with. The first Zionist Congress was scheduled to be held in Munich, Germany. And they had to move it to Switzerland because of opposition from Jewish people in Germany who didn't want anything to do, thank you very much, with being transported to Israel according to this Zionist agenda. In other words, Rothschild Zionist agenda. And then, of course, and I would strongly suggest this is not a coincidence, the German Jews were treated grotesquely in the decades that followed, through the rise of the Nazi Party and all that stuff, and of course the Nazis were funded by the Rockefellers, by the Bush family, through the
on record. There were congressional hearings.
Exactly. The Rockefellers funded a whole floor of a German university for a guy called Ernst Rudin, who was Hitler's race purity expert.
The Kaiser Wilhelm Institute.
Yes, exactly. And it's like I've just said, Alex, there are no borders with these people. And if we see borders and divisions like that, we're going to lose the plot. And so as a result of the appalling way that Jews were treated in Germany, suddenly they were moving out of Germany to Israel, and they were moving to the United States. In other words, the Rothschilds got what they wanted as a result of the Nazis and what they did. This is not a coincidence. Now, when you look at Israel and their grotesque treatment of the Palestinians, it is a mirror of the way the Nazis operated in Germany in so many ways. Now, that is not a paradox, because the same force that was behind the Nazis, that treated the Jews in that way in Germany, is the same force behind the Israeli regime that's treating the Palestinians as they are today.
All right, stay there, David, get a drink of water, because I can hear you need to cough. We're going to come right back. Long segment coming up, and we'll get into a bunch of other issues. I asked David what he wanted to talk about, and this is it. We'll be right back. Very interesting information. Ladies and gentlemen, bottom line, governments get power out of wars, and they get to take the liberties of the general public. And whether it's communist Chinese or thug enforcers here in the United States, Israel, or anywhere, they have the same wicked gleam in their eye of authoritarian domination, bloodthirst. And it's up to good people to stand up against evil people. And David was talking about divide and conquer. That's what the system seeks to do, is to divide us. My only mission, my goal, is to have humanity survive and thrive, and to have a future, and I want everyone, race, color, creed, religion, to do that. But the globalists are masters at playing us off against each other, and masters through multiculturalism to actually turn everyone against each other in the name of that, and to try to force populations in together to play them off against each other. That's what's happening. And now The West has overthrown Iran over and over again. It's steaming towards war again. David Icke, is there going to be an Iran war? What do you see happening in the future? Where is this going? Gas prices, open announcements of world government. I mean, I thought we were crazies. But, mega banks will run Europe and the U.S. and issue the global SDR. It's all happening. Carbon taxes, Agenda 21, shutting down rural areas, arresting Amish everywhere, arresting people selling tomatoes on the side of the road. I mean, police running around with crazed eyes, military checkpoints now everywhere, TSA on highways. I mean, it is really starting to move quick, David Icke. What's happening?
Well, it is, and you know, I've been saying for a long, long time that this is not just happening in the realms of the reality that we experience. It's coming from somewhere much deeper. And you cannot orchestrate. You've just articulated a long list of things, Alex, and they are a long list of things within an enormous, vast list of things that are happening, and they dovetail with each other. This is being orchestrated not by people sitting around the tables deciding the next move, but from very, very deep beyond this reality, I would suggest, and it's playing out here. A simple thing, and I've noticed this, and I'm sure other people have too, who've researched this. When something happens, there's never one reason for it. There might be a prime reason, but there's never just one reason. And what you've got now is and I've talked about it in this new book, funnily enough, which of course was written, finished some months ago, that on one side they want this war with Iran, and they are creating mayhem and devastation in the Middle East. But on the other hand, of course, that's bound to have a massive impact, and we've seen nothing yet, I would suggest, on oil prices, which then devastates the world economy. So it's like everything connects to everything else. It's nothing's working in isolation. And as I've been saying for years, the time's going to come, we're here, when they are going to throw absolutely everything at us, so that we, in a panic, in despair, just say, do something, whatever. They're
lining up a whole bunch of agendas that build towards that interlocking nexus at the top, and they only do things if it adds another Lego or another domino or another stack in the pyramid to their whole agenda. You can see it like fractal nanotech.
Yes,
and I agree. That's what all the religions say. That's what common sense says. We're in the middle of space, and that's what you're saying. People get blown away by, but what are Christians saying? There is an alien or dark force. That's what my gut says. This is beyond human intelligence. This is a master evil.
Well, what's interesting, you know, when you research this is whether it's religions or whether it's ancient cultures or whatever, if you just take a step back from the different names and the different ways of describing it, there is an unbelievable common theme. The Sumerian tablets found in what is now Iraq talk about a non-human force they call that has become known as the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. In the Islamic religion, they have the phenomenon of the jinn, that are entities that operate outside of human sight, manipulate humanity without being seen, and manipulate human perception of reality through the human mind. You then have the... Yeah,
they play tricks on you. You ask for a ton of gold, but you better ask for it 10 feet in front of you. They're going to drop it on your head.
And then you have the demon theme within the Christian religion and what have you. And then you have the Gnostics, which is a word I understand means knowledge. These were the Cathars who were slaughtered. These were the people that ran the great library of Alexandria who were slaughtered, and so were their writings destroyed. But in 1945 in Egypt, a great mass of them were found, which gave the Gnostic view of what's happening in the world. And 1/5, something like 1/5 of the texts are about entities they call archons, which are manipulating human society and manipulating it through the human mind, exactly what the Islamic religion says. And then you go to South Africa, and the Zulu culture, where they talk about the Chitahuri.
Well, look at Jewish mysticism and all of that, and King Solomon and the genies and all that.
Yeah, Alex, it's all in front of us. If only we would stop dividing and compartmentalizing these things by the different names and the different name given to the belief system.
Okay, so I mean, this is pretty far out for, because I normally cover just political stuff we can prove, but obviously we can cover this for any audience because the elite at Bohemian Grove, Skull and Bones, they are obsessed with it. I've talked to people on record and off record, rich widows of very famous people, where their husbands were worshiping the owl idols, the goat idols. They really believe in this. I've been to Bohemian Grove. They are getting off on it. So even if you don't believe in this, atheist people out there, the elite are obsessed with this. None of them are non-religious, and they believe they're getting power from these entities. So what, from your research, what do the entities want?
This is the point, Alex, that you were talking about earlier in terms of Jewish people and the Zionist elite and all the rest of it. The elites that control the governments around the world are not following Judaism or Christianity.
Babylonian mysticism.
They're following what we call Satanism. And Satanism, if you really study it, is the worship of these entities under endless names that were perceived to be the gods. You know, this is why the Mayans worshipped a serpent god called Kukulkan. This is why in Central America other cultures worshipped the feathered serpent god called Quetzalcoatl. All over you see this recurring theme. They are Satanists. And what's happening at satanic rituals while they're doing the sacrifice is the entities operating outside the very narrow frequency band of human sight called visible light by scientists. They're feeding off the energy of terror that's coming off the victim. And so a war, pepper bombing Tripoli or Baghdad or a world war.
It's a feeding frenzy.
Oh, it's a feeding frenzy. It's unbelievable. What is it? It's bloodlust. You see, you mentioned earlier, Alex, that, you know, these people have a bloodlust. Well, it's not even, as we know, it's not even theoretical or symbolic bloodlust. It's a real one. They drink the stuff.
That's the old term, bloodthirsty.
Yes, exactly that. And so we have a blood.
So you're talking about interdimensional vampires, basically, which we see them bombarding us with vampiric iconography. What is that? No pun intended.
This comes. This is where vampires come from. You know, in Zulu lore and in other native cultures,
the ancient Greeks believed in it. They had vampire hunting deals.
Yes, they say that cannibalism was introduced to human society by these entities because they are cannibals and they eat human flesh and drink human blood, as do their hybrid representatives that we call the elite bloodlines and the aristocracy and the royal families and those that control the banks and all the governments and all the rest of it. So this whole human sacrifice, cannibalistic phenomenon came with these entities, and therefore for a long time, when humans were, shall we say, less evolved than they are now, at least large numbers of them are now, they could openly do their sacrifices to the gods. And by the way, when they talked about the sacrificing young virgins to the gods, that was code for children. This is why so many children go missing and end up being sacrificed to the gods. But there came a point where humanity had grown up to the point where it was no longer acceptable to do this stuff openly.
So now they do it as wars. But what about Ezekiel? The whole Bible says, give not your children to the fires of Molech. I mean, it says children being sacrificed right there.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is that people have no problem, Alex, that there was human sacrifice and child sacrifice in the ancient world, right? No problem. What I'm saying is it never ended. It just went underground because humanity reached the point where it wouldn't have it anymore. And it's happening on an unbelievable scale, I cannot tell you. The number of children that go missing in the world every year, never to be seen again, is utterly shocking beyond belief, because these entities want the energy of children before puberty, because at puberty we see puberty as a hormonal chemical change, but what it is to these entities is the human energy field of the children changes, and it plays through as hormonal change at the chemical level, but it starts and is fundamentally driven by an energetic change. They want the child's energy before that change takes place, and that's why they're obsessed with children, and that's why there's so many missing children. What's going on in the world, even to most conspiracy researchers, who brilliantly, and good luck to them, are doing the banking, the wars, the manipulated wars, the manipulated terrorist attacks. Even to many of them, they won't go here. But this is what's happening.
Let me add a caveat to that, David. I'm sure you know about this, but it turns out DynCorp, who's been in congressional hearings running giant child kidnapping rings. I mean, even the UN said in a 2-year period in Southern Europe, 1.2 million women and children went missing. I mean, this is like factory level, Armageddon, Holocaust, extermination level, disappearing into all these labyrinths to feed this, the snuff films, all of it. But then I learned, people said, you didn't know? It was actually what Catherine Austin Fitts about 5 years ago pointed out, and I went and search engined it, and it was true that DynCorp runs the private CPS. On average, they've got more than half the contracts in the country at the health departments, and they're DynCorp people. And that it even came out on CNN a few years after that, that in Florida alone, there was like 3,500 missing kids they'd taken. They were finding them dead in other countries and stuff, but it got shut down. They are actually operating, the CPS in many cases is actually a foreign kidnapping ring operation. I mean, it's so off the charts evil right there. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Alex, that's just an interesting point, because in this new book, Remember Who You Are, in the last one, Human Race, Get Off Your Knees, I address this very subject in considerable detail, because I've had a lot of experience of it in this country and in America. When I say experience, I mean I've interacted and been with people who've had their children taken away and stuff like that. And as a result of that, I realized just how this child protection services scam is not there to protect children. It's the last thing they want to do. There are some genuine
people. It's come out that they've got lists of certain kids they're looking for. If you've got a black-haired, blue-eyed girl, that's their favorite, or green-eyed, then it goes into blonde, blue-eyed. I mean, they are hunting.
See, this is what I've gone into in detail in these books, because they are seeking to have an endless flow of children for what they want and what they do with them. And what better way than to control child protection services? Now, what's happened in Britain, and I know it's happened in America, so I've researched all that, is that the number of children being taken, not just from families per se, but from blatantly loving families and caring families, is going off the Richter scale. Tony Blair, who's big time involved in all this and absolutely agrees with it, when he was Prime Minister of Britain, introduced, believe it or not, incentives, financial incentives to councils to meet targets for taking children away from their
it's global standardization.
Parents.
Bill Clinton started that, where they have to increase the quota each year or get none of the federal money. I mean, these are, and of course, he's an admitted occultist. His wife's a witch, and they are just when you see Tony Blair, folks, it is a literal vampire. Just that the teeth don't do all that. It's a demonic goblin.
Now, just let's look at this. You are giving financial incentives to these organizations to meet.
You pay so they can steal your kids and gang rape them before they cut their heads off and do all the things to them.
Any sane society that cared about the children and cared about justice would never have any incentive to take children away from their parents, because every single case would have to be judged on the merits of the case.
Well, the CPS worldwide is 5 times more likely, it's the same in England, to abuse children than any other group. It's admitted that they are a black hole of child abuse and devilry. Oh,
yes, they are, and it happens in every country. Now, we come back to this global web I talked about earlier. this global web not only controls the banking system and the transnational corporations and the governments and the media at ownership and the mainstream level, it also controls via these corporations and in Britain via the British government network, these child protection services. It controls the police that's supposed to investigate the abuse of children and allegations by children about abuse by famous people, but they don't. They don't because that's controlled too. They control the courts, which take the children away against all the evidence. This is what's happening. This network, this global corporation of bloodlines and societies, controls all these different elements of society. So we're not looking at individual isolated dots like the courts and the CPS and all the rest of it. We're looking at a network.
Let me tell you, I've been to these CPS courts watching it, and I've seen it across the nation on YouTube, the court hearings. It's 90% of the time a weird jackboot, butch-haired woman screaming at families and literally licking their lips. I mean, you're looking, if you saw the woman on the street, you'd say that is some kind of pervert demon. And they are giant pervert demons openly, like an octopus just grabbing kids. I mean, it's just, it's like the witch from The Little Mermaid. I mean, these judges that take the kids, 90% of them or more, every time I see them, they look like the witch from The Little Mermaid.
Yeah, well, we've had people in this country, after they've won in a court to take children away from loving families, we've had them high-fiving in the court. This is what we're dealing with. No empathy.
No, the vampires know, man, it's going to be gang raping tonight. They're going to have that kid crying, squealing, and they're going to be lucky if they live. The devils are going to have some fun. We'll be right back. All right, David will be with us 5 minutes in the next hour. Then Bruce Fine, Ron Paul's chief advisor, policy advisor, will be joining us to talk about what's happening in our world for a full hour. By the way, is he joining us via Skype? Because I know he was on the Nightly News a while back on Skype. Wow, that's going to be great for video Skype, not just for radio listeners, but for people watching at prisonplanet.tv. It's great to have David via audio Skype. He's like he's in the room with us. Wanted to tell you, David's going to be speaking at 2 events in Hawaii this month, in Honolulu, and an all-day on March 24th, and Maui all day on March 31st. He has a new book out called Remember Who You Are, DavidIcke.com. And I should add, again, I remember 15, 16 years ago seeing David Icke stuff and thinking, man, this is crazy. But over the years, the way he politely just took some mean comments I'd said about him like a gentleman, and then the fact that listening to him and talking to him, I just have a good feeling. I've learned to go off my instincts. And I just get a good feeling when I listen to him or when I talk to him. And I don't 100% go off my discernment, but I just do. And I hope everything he's saying isn't true because it's so crazy. But regardless, a lot of it's been turned out to be true. And we just need to realize we're in a spiritual world. There's a lot going on we don't see, and the elites are obsessed with it, and they're in control. So why are they obsessed with it? They always want to tell us, oh, be atheists, nothing's going on. That's because they want you basically blind to what's going on. Also, if you want to support us, well, it's not even supporting us. We've got 100 business cards with Infowars.com on them that are got You Are the Resistance on them, and a Citizen Roll Book and 2 bumper stickers for 1 penny. All you pay is the $4.95 for shipping, and that really is at cost. And we're getting like 500 orders for these a day, which is going to be really successful, but I don't know if the guys can handle it. So I may discontinue this special and boost the price just to get less orders, because then I'll lose money about to hire extra people. I'm happy to do it at cost, but I can't lose money. We've got a bunch of great deals on books and videos and films exposing Oklahoma City as an inside job. It's all available at Infowars.com. So I hope that you will go there and support us if you believe in the message we're putting out and want to support free speech in this country. Going back to David, only 3 or 4 minutes left in this segment, 5 minutes in the next. David, it's very painful to me to know that they are obsessed with hurting children. They are doing it. I've seen it. What you described, the high-fiving, all the abuse that comes out, but they enforce on themselves. But humanity has backed them off before and at least made it go underground. They're trying to sell us on torture, secret arrests now. They're trying to turn our political and spiritual atmosphere into what they are. How does all this end in your mind?
Well, I was talking 22 years ago, from the very start of my conscious awareness of any of this stuff, about the fact that there was a vibrational change coming. I dubbed them the truth vibrations because I understood that they would have the effect of bringing to the surface all that had been hidden from humanity. Now, God, 22 years ago, there was no sign of that. But look at it now. I mean, the very fact that what we're doing now, it's talking about this stuff. What we know now about what's happening in the world and what's going on in the background and how it's controlled is off the Richter scale compared with what we knew 22 years ago, even 10 years ago, much of it, and what have you. And the other thing that I was told would happen is that this vibrational change, this quickening of the vibrational fabric of this reality would have the effect of acting like a spiritual alarm clock, and people would start to wake up from their slumber, their coma, their amnesic state, and they would start to, this is the title of the book, this is where it comes from, they would start to remember who they really were. Not the body, but consciousness, infinite consciousness with infinite potential, having an experience through the vehicle of the body. And clearly, when I look back 22 years, I look back 10 years, even 5 years, the numbers of people now who are awakening to another view of themselves and the world is absolutely phenomenal.
Back in 60 seconds. Stay there. Finish up on this. Back in 60 with David Icke. Now into hour number 3. Ron Paul's chief campaign policy advisor, Bruce Fine, is going to be joining us. David Icke was getting into his new book, Remember Who You Are. Yeah, for me, that's what it's like, wake up, you're in the universe, you're on a planet. You can feel how ancient everything is. You know you're part of something much bigger. You're not 38 years old. I mean, it's just inherent that our spirits are real. I know it. I don't think it. It's real. The elite know it, and they want to try to warp us. David Icke.
Yes, they do. The whole idea, the whole foundation of the conspiracy to enslave humanity is to enslave us in merely, purely five-sense reality. So everything is what the five senses perceive it to be. When that's just the vehicle, the way we interact with this reality, the real self is consciousness, infinite consciousness, like a droplet in an infinite ocean. And of course, when you put a droplet in an ocean, where's the droplet end and the ocean start? We are the great infinite field of consciousness. We're just a different point of attention within it. My point of attention is called David Icke. Yours is called Alex Jones. But we're all one consciousness. And of course, when people start to understand that and they realize we're all one, experiencing itself in different ways, then the ability to divide and rule us starts to fade, because the perception of apartness, the perception of something being apart from us, therefore there can be a division between us, starts to fade. So they have to keep us, not only for that reason, but for others, like keeping us in ignorance, they have to keep us focused in five-sense reality. And it's a bit like symbolic of consciousness, me sitting at a computer with the keyboard and the mouse, and I am interacting with the internet, the collective reality, through a computer. And that's fine as long as I'm dictating to the computer where it goes and what it thinks about where it goes and all its perceptions. If you get to a point where the person at the keyboard and the mouse is disconnected from the computer, or an influence of it, the computer is now deciding where it goes. And of course, the computer is programmable. It's programmed by its very nature. It's very limited in its ability to perceive and to process information. And that's what they've done, because the body is what I call body-mind. It's like a biological computer. It's the vehicle which allows us to lock into this narrow band of frequencies that we call the world and experience them and interact with them. That's fine. But when the body-computer-mind becomes the governor and not the servant of consciousness, then you're in a situation where the few can control the many. Just like it would be if the computer started deciding where it was going to go on the internet and what it thought of it. The perception of the computer, with all its great limitations and ignorance compared with human consciousness, would be much easier to control en masse than awake people who are conscious and can see between the lines and can see things that a computer program can't see.
David, we're out of time. We're out of time, but you've graciously agreed to come back on the nightly news. We'll then air on the radio the next day, on or around the 20th. So we will expand and get into the book itself in that second interview, and I can't wait to read it. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Pleasure, Alex. Thanks very much, mate.
All right, and the fellas are going to talk to you just for a moment about that next booking on the show. God bless you, David. Thank you for coming on. Wow, certainly gets you thinking, and he's a gentleman who I believe is pure of heart and really done a lot to get people thinking, and that's something that we're all very, very thankful for. DavidIke.com is his website. I'm Alex Jones. The websites are Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.tv. Don't forget, we're running 15-day free trials right now at PrisonPlanet.tv for the nightly news that is listener-supported, and then much of that ends up getting aired here for millions every day on the syndicated radio broadcast that we are now into the third hour on. Bruce Fine, who is Ron Paul campaign's senior policy advisor, will be joining us on the campaign, the latest police state developments, all these wars coming up. It's all coming up after the quick break. Stay with us. More of the InfoWar straight ahead. Okay, we are now 8 minutes into the final hour of this worldwide broadcast. Of course, I'll also be back this evening, 7 o'clock, with the InfoWars Nightly News. Coming up the next few days, I'm going to be able to air the big hour-and-a-half interview I did, taped with Dave Mustaine of Megadeth. Politics, Metallica, everything. He talked about stuff he's never talked about before. And he hadn't done an interview in a while, in a few weeks, because they took it out of context that he was endorsing Santorum. He put a press release out saying that's not what I did, and wanted it retracted, and they never really did that. So he also talked about that in the interview. He says he likes Ron Paul. He just doesn't fully get the foreign policy, and some of the media, you know, did things like imply that, well, Ron Paul says we're like the Taliban. So people really get concerned about the military situation. I want to raise that first with Bruce Fine, who we're very thankful for joining us in his busy schedule. Senior policy advisor to Ron Paul 2012 campaign. Of course, to go over his bio would take a while, but it's important to. Bruce Fine specializes in constitutional and international law. He's a frequent witness before Congress and is a regular guest on national television and radio. He is chairman of the American Freedom Agenda, founder of Bruce Fine and Associates, Inc., and the Litchfield Group, author of Constitutional Peril, The Life and Death Struggle of Our Constitution and Democracy, a weekly columnist for the Washington Times. Mr. Fine graduated with honors from Harvard Law School in '72, clerked for the prestigious federal court, served as special assistant to the Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Counsel and the Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust. He was involved in some big antitrust cases, Assistant Director of the Office of Legal Policy, Associate Deputy Attorney General, General Counsel of the Federal Communications Commission, Counsel of the Joint Congressional Committee on Covert Arms Sales to Iran, Visiting Fellow for Constitutional Studies with the Heritage Foundation, Adjunct Scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, and Guest Lecturer at the Brookings Institute, to name just a few. But he's Ron Paul's chief policy advisor. That tells you a lot. The campaign is going great. He won some states, clearly, Iowa and Maine, and there was fraud there, and now they're trying the same old tricks, but he's winning by injecting real issues. But continuing with the foreign policy, I see the former head of the Mossad saying don't attack Iran. I see most of the generals, the last two Joint Chiefs of Staff chairmen say don't do it. But then when Ron Paul goes with even what the CIA is saying about this isn't a good idea, he's the bad guy. So how is the minority view the majority view with Romney and Santorum and Gingrich, and then how is Ron Paul bad, Bruce, because he's actually a scholar and informed? Can perhaps you can tell us why you think that's the case?
Well, it's my book, American Empire Before the Fall. It's recently published by Campaign for Liberty, which describes what I style the psychology of empire. Even if it's a minority view and the majority of Americans are not out on the streets marching to say invade Iran, we can't tolerate a nuclear-capable Iran, even though we can, a nuclear-capable Pakistan, a nuclear-armed India or North Korea. But it is this psychology of empire that sort of pervaded our our elite, if you will. And Ron Paul, you correctly identify as someone who's expressing the majority viewpoint. And I want to underscore this total media misrepresentation of Ron Paul's stance on foreign policy. When it comes to being a hawk on defending Americans on American soil, Ron Paul is the biggest hawk of all. He doesn't believe, however, that we should be squandering our defense resources on defending other countries or other peoples. That's for humanitarians or there are other countries to do. And we're spending trillions of dollars and wasting lives and limb of Americans for other people's liberty, even assuming that our motives are altruistic. And take, for example, the situation in Iran. Remember, probably, Alex, you and I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. We know nuclear deterrence works. We know it doesn't matter how power hungry you are. No country has ever craved nuclear incineration. And we could totally, and we should threaten any country who would attack us with nuclear weapons or non-nuclear weapons with incineration if they're going to be the aggressor. And that kind of threat and deterrent works. It's worked every single year throughout the Cold War. There's no indication that somehow, for the first time in 4,000 years, Iranian rulers covet, destruction. If they wanted that, they could jump into the Tigris and Euphrates tomorrow and drown themselves to visit their alleged 77 virgins in heaven.
Well, haven't the Iranians shown the opposite, extremely wily, extremely cunning?
Yeah, absolutely. They display all the earmarks of realpolitik, including negotiating, an end to the Iran-Iraq war. They didn't choose Armageddon. When we shot down the USS Vincennes, we shot down an airliner over the Persian Gulf, killed almost 300. And there was negotiations for reparations. The Iranians didn't say, aha, now we're going to launch a nuclear attack on the United States, even if it could be done, given the problem of delivery vehicles going that far. And then it said, well, but they might attack Israel. Yeah, that's Israel's problem, not ours. And we should authorize, Israel's got to do, every country has a right of self-preservation.
Ron Paul has said Israel has 400 nuclear weapons, high-tech system. I mean, Iran would commit suicide if they did that.
Absolutely, and they've never tried to do anything like that, before. The Iranians are not in Jerusalem. The Iranians are not in Tel Aviv. The Iranians are not stupid, and historically as well, Alex, Iran has not been hostile to Israel. If you think about its birth, 1948, the only country in the Middle East that did not declare war on Israel was Iran. So there isn't any kind of megalomania and messianic fanaticism about destroying Israel. And there's no reason why Israel's deterrent wouldn't work just like ours. They clearly have a more formidable nuclear arsenal that you've identified. And why would Iran and its leaders who covet the exercise of power, do something that would invite destruction? Even the North Koreans, they're probably even crazier than the Iranians with regard to their fanatical control on their population, have not launched nuclear weapons against any other country. And I say deterrence works. And moreover, if deterrence is cast aside, Alex, there's no stopping point. Then we could go into any country in the world and say, we're bombing you because we don't think that you ought to have a nuclear capability at some time.
Well, there you go, Professor, constitutional lawyer Bruce Fine. That's exactly what they say in the NDAA. Break that down, because first Obama says he's not going to sign it. Then we learn he demanded it. Then he does sign it. And now he comes out and says, don't worry, I won't use it. But suddenly the Attorney General says, but I will kill citizens overseas. And, well, maybe we'll secret arrest people. So it's the classic tactic of advancing when there's pressure, retreating, and then as soon as the dust settles, advancing and then launching the war in Libya without congressional approval. I mean, it is really scary.
It is, and think where we've gone from Libya. The discussion right now on attacking Iran, it's all assumed, contrary to the Constitution, that the president alone will decide. He's talking to AIPAC. He'd make these speeches saying, well, I will decide it's not going to be containment, it's going to be something else. Really? The Constitution says Congress makes that decision. And so he usurps the power of Congress without blinking an eye. And what's equally stunning, Alex, is Congress there accepts it. And there's no articles of impeachment saying, no, the most important power we exercise is the decision to whether to go to war or not. whether we're going to have our men and women risk that last full measure of devotion for somebody else's liberty. And the president usurps the power, and Congress doesn't even utter a peep. It's truly stunning. I lived and worked through the Nixon impeachment hearings, in 1973 and 74. And what he did is almost a tea party compared to the sacrilege of the Constitution that goes on daily right now in the White House.
So how do we break the hoax, Bruce, that Ron Paul is a strange bird when it comes to defense of this country when, as you just stated, look, most of the Israeli experts, that's not a secret. In the Israeli press, they admit most of their military saying don't attack Iran because it'll make Israel look like the bad guy. Israel will be attacked on all sides. Oil prices will explode. You've already got 400,000 Israelis out, a few months ago protesting their economy. Why do you think Netanyahu and others are creeping towards it?
Well, the Israel, in some sense, Alex, is a microcosm of our own empire psychology. And it's something that's not flattering about human nature, but there are mentalities that get a thrill. They get sort of gratified out of being the bully on the playground. And even when you have the highest levels of Mossad saying Iran is not an existential threat to Israel, Israel sort of feels, well, this is our manhood, if you will. We're not going to permit the Holocaust again, and so everybody gets their adrenaline pumping. And it's a very juvenile and infantile attitude to have when, the people's lives are at stake in huge numbers. And that's, I think, what we're witnessing in Israel. It's like every time you get an entity with unchecked power, it then becomes arrogant and then finds kind of adolescent thrill over asserting its power and being a bully there.
Yes.
But it sounds simplistic, but in fact, that's what's going on. Nobody in your audience, Alex, has ever woken up and worried that Iran was going to have a nuclear weapon come down on their city. In fact, no one in their daily life makes any decision based on a fear that Iran will use nuclear weapons against the United States. And yet here we are as a country suggesting, my gosh, it's just around the corner, and we got a bomb and another $100 billion and risk all the wrath of the Middle East in order to prevent a nuclear capability from arising in Iran.
But that's what, like 95%, literally, because I read the papers constantly, almost all the experts say, almost no threat from Iran. But if you attack them, then Israel really is going to be in trouble.
Yeah, of course they will, because it's natural to seek retaliation when you're brutalized by an aggressor. We do the same thing. And that's what to me seems so astonishing, is this idea that human nature is different in Iran than in the United States, and they'll just accept our attack and then surrender and say, okay, you tell us how you want us to reconstruct our government, we'll abandon nuclear weapons. That's truly living in fantasy land, utter fantasy land. The same thing we're doing in Afghanistan and we're trying to do in Vietnam as well. And this is where I think we've totally lost our way in the world as a republic. We got to remember we are totally entitled to defend ourselves and to incinerate anybody who attacks. But hey, United States, blessings of liberty are about blessings of liberty for Americans. And we like our example to influence events abroad, but we fight only to protect.
Stay there. We're going to come right back and get into the campaign itself and how you're advising Ron Paul. Stay with us. We'll be back. We are back live. Thank you so much for joining us. Before he leaves us, we'll tell you about his latest book. In fact, we'll put it on screen right now. American Empire Before the Fall. And I want to talk to Bruce before he leaves us about what he sees that fall looking like. Now, if you've got questions for the chief policy advisor for Ron Paul, so we can get get to 4 or 5 calls at least, please just have a quick question or comment. We'll go to your calls here in about 10, 15 minutes because we do have him for most of the hour. The toll-free number to join us is 800-259-9231, 800-259-9231. Okay, Bruce, you're there. You're helping the campaign, advising, which really shows how much Ron Paul respects you. Where do you see the campaign going right now?
Well, I think the effort is to assemble as large a delegate count as we can, keep the message pure and straight. You'll notice that he was the only one who didn't use euphemisms to describe the rather harsh language Rush Limbaugh used to sort of debase political debate. And Ron is out there for the message. He's not out there as a megalomaniac, egomaniac, just trying to, build a brand that he can then capitalize on making speeches. And so I think he's working at the caucus level and with the contributions, making clear that he's in this all the way through August. So it may well be that at that time he would have the delegate number that could used as bargaining to push the other nominees over the top with a majority. I think, Alex, there's a substantial likelihood that none of the 4 remaining contenders will arrive in Tampa in August with a majority of delegates, because the majority of states are not winner-take-all states, but proportional representation. So there's a substantial splintering of the delegates in all of these primaries, and that's why even today, Romney at the head of the pack has got less than 200 delegates. And that's towards a total of 1,000, I think 1,144 needed for a majority. So
sure.
He's less than 10% of the way there. And Ron, I think, is very, very scrupulous, indefatigable in campaigning in some of the smaller states where the caucus there will be important in delegate
In fact,
selection.
he's set right now. They don't steal it again. All the polls show to win Idaho. Undoubtedly, he won Maine, and they've admitted all the counties where he was winning big. They just didn't count them. There was clearly a lot of chicanery going on in Iowa, and people say, well, then why get behind him if it's fraud? Well, we show there's fraud by him running, and we have Ron Paul there injecting real ideas. But if they cheated him on the time in the debates, if they've done all these other dirty tricks, I mean, what's your view? I mean, I know it's kind of looking backwards, and it can be seen as being a spoiled sport, but I mean, when the referees are cheating, you've got to call it.
Well, absolutely, you've got to call it. But I think even the cheating has not really diminished substantially Ron's ability to get his message through, Alex. And I think that shows that when you put him head-to-head with Obama and then are polling the entire electorate, not just the Republican electorate, you find Ron scoring better than Santorum.
Well, better than Romney in a lot of them. I mean, he in many of the polls I've seen, Ron Paul, you can look it up, Gallup, you name it, Rasmussen, I mean, I know you know this, Bruce, but he beats Obama with better numbers than Romney.
Yeah, absolutely, because he appeals to independence, and I think that's what's very rewarding about the campaign, that he is changing, the political orthodoxies of the culture more towards liberty and away from empire and ever increasing the size and intrusiveness of government, and it appeals across the board. And the fact that you have Republicans who are at least one slice of the electorate, galvanizing around other candidates who I call them Tweedledum, Tweedledees to Obama, suggests that that's not representative of the country as a whole. And Ron cares more about the future of the country than any particular party, if you will. And I think that's what makes him a great American, because real high-level politics is trying to make every American a winner. It's not a football game, a winner and a loser, zero-sum. You've got one group of citizens getting gratified off of depressing another group. Hey, we're all hang together. We're all Americans first, so let's make everybody gain, and that's how we can make us a great civilization and honor the ideals of the founding fathers.
You're right. Another hoax. We're going to go to break in the long segment, come back and get into your book and more on Ron Paul and what you see happening. But another big issue is he gets the majority, in some cases over 70% of the Republican candidates that are getting donations from the military. He gets the majority of those. But there's this hoax that, Ron Paul doesn't like the military. He's one of the only people up there that isn't a chicken hawk and actually has served. And, well, I mean, my audience knows that, you know that, but I want to get your take on that briefly, Bruce, because I've never asked you that question on the other side. And then I want to get into more of the attacks on the Bill of Rights and Constitution and where you see this empire going, what the collapse will look like straight ahead with Bruce Fine. We'll be back. My friends, if you want to understand how the crony capitalists are anti-free market and how they're using government to shut down their competition and what Agenda 21 is, what the whole New World Order system is, get my films, The Obama Deception, and, of course, Fall the Republic. We also carry Behind the Green Mask, Agenda 21, excellent book on the subject that's key for county and city and state leaders. It's all available at Infowars.com. Don't ever think just because you're informed to know about all this that your friends, your family, your neighbors don't. And I know I'm, stating the obvious here, but it's so important to speak out individually right now for this country and for a great champion of liberty like Ron Paul, because resistance is victory. Ron Paul didn't get a lot of traction 4 years ago, but he helped grow a big nationwide movement. He's probably gotten 10 times the traction this time around. And the ideas, no matter where this campaign goes, will continue to move forward and grow exponentially. And so look at the whole liberty movement around the focal point Ron Paul as almost like the flashpoint, where it starts, one of the key matrix lines that will help shatter this statist centralized system. Now, Bruce, I wanted to talk about your book and how the empire is clearly flailing around trying to expand just so it doesn't collapse, I guess, fleeing forward. But when I see a federal court, circuit court, what is it, the 7th ruling, yeah, police can just pull you over or come in your house without a warrant and download the contents of your cell phone. And now police in Michigan and other states pull you over for speeding, take your phone, download it. Photos, numbers, everything, surfing habits. Drones in the sky, predator drones being used against cattle rustlers, checkpoints, state police gunboats on the rivers, TSA now popping up in Dallas, groping people at the train stations and on the highways. I mean, America has been so free for so long, and there's obviously been problems, but now I don't know if we're just ready to deal with something this overt. It's so over the top, and people are starting to wake up, but I wonder, is it fast enough? And you've been in Washington, you advise Congress, you're around these people. I mean, it's just so absurdist and cartoon levels what I'm trying to get at. I don't have words to describe how classically tyrannical and crony, you were mentioning elite groups giving their buddies money and no-bid contracts and energy firm deals. I mean, it's just so obvious. How far will this go?
Well, the problem we have is the empire mentality, at least instinctively covets what I call a risk-free existence. And so every conceivable encroachment on liberty is accepted if you think it might address a problem that might arise as frequently as a meteor or an asteroid hitting the United States, which is virtually never. And it's not just those incidents that you've described more overtly, but the United States government now claims the right without a warrant to seize all of our internet or electronic signatures, all of our footprints there. The Google, the Yahoo, every place. They say that if you expose any information about yourself to a third party, which is impossible to prevent when you're on the internet, the government can come grab it and build a dossier against you. And now the FBI, for the first time in history, Alex, does what they style assessments. Ordinarily, they only begin to investigate someone if there's some articulable suspicion of complicity in crime. Now assessments begin if an agent believes that maybe sometimes in the future you may turn and do something bad, even though there's no evidence that you have you create any danger to society or to
pre-crime
terrorists. Yeah, and so they do assessments, and you're supposed to love it because it clears you of the suspicion that you're a traitor or you're a terrorist. So that now we have the government acting on the assumption that we're all guilty until they prove us innocent, which turns the whole idea of our republic and our unalienable rights on its head. We're free. Liberty is the rule until the government shows that we've done something wrong. And that's just one example of where we are. And to show how absurd this has become, if we look at this last statute that you referred to, the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, here was a situation, Alex, where not a single person in the entire the United States was clamoring to endow the president with more power to send the military to our doorsteps and take us off to Guantanamo Bay based upon secret facts and secret evidence that suggests that we're somehow aiding terrorism. Nobody was clamoring for it, and yet Congress unilaterally, with the assistance of the president, creates power that King George III never ever possessed when we overthrew him in 1776. And again, it's this instinctive craving when you're a superpower to try to think you can make life risk-free. But you can't unless you're willing to destroy all of liberty. I mean, nobody can guarantee to 100% certainty that they're a saint and they'll never do anything bad. And if you're trying to create life that's risk-free, you'll lock up everybody and everything. And to somebody now who's involved in the safety endeavor, it's a little bit like to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. To somebody at the TSA or involved in the security, everybody looks like a traitor. You know, and that's not what a republic is about.
Well, that's what it is. It's as you said, it's making us all guilty until proven innocent instead of innocent until proven guilty. They had the kite flying event here in Austin over the weekend. It's the biggest in the country, Kite Festival. They had the National Guard out there searching people and just randomly now. I can't even go to the park now without seeing soldiers, and it's just asinine. It's all about a total culture of paranoia.
You're exactly right, Alex. And because what's the track record of these situations? Zero detentions, zero identification of terrorists. You know, look at how many times has the TSA searched, groped, and everything else, us taking pictures. How many terrorists have those machines and searches uncovered? Zero. Absolutely zero. You go on Amtrak here in Washington, there is no searches whatsoever. There have been no incidents before or since 9/11. And it's not that it's conceivable that something bad could happen. You could get a Timothy McVeigh, but we have homicides too. You know, we got 14, 15, 16,000 homicides a year. We don't revel in it, but that's a price that we take if we're not.
Well, what about this as a constitutional lawyer? What about this as a constitutional lawyer? Because I get emails saying, okay, you're saying they haven't stopped one terror attack. That's because they are there. There haven't been terror attacks. Well, by that idea, then you've got to put TSA in every cornfield because there might hypothetically be an attack there. I mean, this is nothing but a pretext to totally power grab.
Exactly right. And they say, well, have these really been the indispensable barriers to another terrorist attack? If they were, how come there haven't been any terrorist attack on Amtrak where there's no searches whatsoever when you go on the train? And moreover, if you just, and this is where I think the politicians and President Obama is especially, you know, subject to criticism. If they would just stop the darn thing for a month and then they'd see there are no terrorist acts, then you'd show that this is Chicken Little saying the sky is falling down. Well, then really wasn't all those checks, you know, that was deterring it because there wasn't any threat there in the first instance. Americans love their government. They're patriotic. They're loyal. They're not going to try to blow up people, just like Americans generally don't commit homicide. It doesn't mean that there can't be an exception, but the price of liberty is to take some risk, and it's going to result in some tragedy. But the greater tragedy is to reduce all Americans to vassals and lords of some big brother government and destroy the whole purpose of government. Well,
I was about to say, I mean, as you know, common sense history, but the founders, George Washington said, government's like fire. It is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Democide governments, there's big university reports on this. They debate the numbers, but it's between 262 million and 311 million people murdered, non-military combatants, but we're talking 200 plus million conservatively, people killed in the 20th century by government. Well, that's common sense to somebody who knows the Americana system. But for those that love the statist system, I mean, if you want to have prior constraint because somebody might do something, one group we got to watch, and that is always the number one suspect, as our founders said, is government.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Alex. You hit the nail on the head. When you try to examine what is the greatest source of evil in the history of the world, government is greater than individuals by a factor of 1,000,000 to 1. It does, you know, you can have people who commit homicide, even attempt to engage in organized criminal activity, but with regard to the massive, unbelievable, you know, size of the massacres and the atrocities, government is capable and does historically inflict vastly greater mayhem than any individual or group of individuals can ever do. And that explains the numbers that you've identified. And that explains why, in choosing between a danger from an individual and a danger from government, it's the danger of government that's got to be captured first rather than placed ahead. I mean, viewed as less suspect than an individual. And I also want to address this idea, well, the laws don't work because, listen, we prosecuted terrorists before 9/11, we still ended up with that day of abominations. But the same thing can be said about laws against murder. I mean, we get 14, 15,000 murders each year. We prosecute people for murder. We sentence some of them to death, but it doesn't end all murders. We still end up with the same number of, annually. But we recognize, we don't revel in that tragedy, but we recognize if the only way that you can stop all murders is to send the police or the military into everybody's house and detain everybody on the idea that maybe in the next 20 years they could have an evil thought, that's the end of the United States. That's the end of freedom. That's the end of why we are a country.
Bruce, I want to raise the collapse of the empire and what the time frame is you see in a general sense, because your new book's on that subject, man, then take a few calls. But from my historical research, and those that don't know history are doomed to repeat it, I've been reading history books since I'm about 10 years old just because I found them entertaining. That's actually what got me into talk radio, politics, everything, because I found that the best reading was actually history, because truth is stranger than fiction. Why read a science fiction book or a Louis L'Amour Western when I could read, real stuff that happened and every page was jam-packed? And then, of course, I recognized the same patterns in modern times and didn't see people threatened by it. So that's why I got involved. Same reason Ron Paul did. Same reason you did. I mean, history really is a lens to the future and the present, not just the past. But isn't it that empires always cause their own demise by the attempt to dominate and take over?
There have been about 72 prior empires, and you're exactly right, Alex. It's self-ruination. They collapse because of arrogance and contempt and efforts to control and reach beyond their capabilities. And if you look at the United States, I say maybe we've got 40, 50 years more. It could be shorter than that time before we simply collapse because we cannot support economically the empire and we cannot protect ourselves when every day we're creating enemies by interfering with every other nation's political dispensation with the use of force. And it doesn't matter what individuals think are our altruistic motives. Yeah, we end up burning Qurans. We end up killing innocent citizens.
Peeing on dead bodies. I mean, you saw the Marines urinating on the bodies, and I heard talk show hosts defending it. And I'm like, don't you know how many troops this is going to get killed now?
Yeah, right. And the idea that the other people don't get angry, when we're killing them and we're destroying their country, I mean, we would react the same way. And we're so arrogant, we somehow think that these people whose countries we're occupying will be grateful and they'll throw flowers at us and we get angry. How come you're not grateful? I mean, we lecture Hamid Karzai in Afghanistan. Oh, you should be loving us. Why are you telling us don't do nighttime raids? Why are you telling us not to use predator drones that kill women and children? You should love us because we've saved you from all this.
It's like the SWAT teams. It's like the SWAT teams with the drug war. You should love us busting down your doors in the middle of the night. You should love the checkpoints. You should love the black uniforms. And it's like, no one likes this. Everyone sees it as a threat instinctively. Final point, and then I want to get to some calls here, Bruce, and I don't want to hog all the time with you today, and I want you to be able to get some questions. But I think the elite also forgets the point that it's not just about having weapons. Who has the moral superiority is who tends to win over time, and we're losing the moral superiority, and it's not just in our politics, just in the culture. When the leaders start engaging in this activity, other people start imitating it, and then corruption runs rampant and the society collapses. So I agree, no way we're going more than 30, 40 years, but with the acceleration of technology and all the things that are happening, Bruce, I don't see us lasting another 15 years. I mean, I see it coming down the line quicker.
Well, it may well be, and historically, empires have collapsed very, very quickly. It's not a long, drawn-out installment plan kind of descent. And you're absolutely right with regard to the weapons technology doesn't mean victory. If that were true, we would have won in Vietnam. I mean, in fact, Robert McNamara, the first Secretary of Defense under John F. Kennedy, visited Vietnam as his first travel abroad, and he returns and says, by every quantitative measure, Alex, we have won the war already, And then we remember the skids and the helicopters out of Saigon. And that is exactly correct. If it was just technology, we would have lost the Revolutionary War. You know, the British had far more sophisticated weapons, had far more frigates, etc. And it's ultimately the moral fiber of the people that will prevail. The Soviets had far greater technology in Afghanistan, and yet they lost because they were in there for corrupt motives as well.
Well, you know the universal rule. The person that's assaulting someone preemptively from a position of corruption will end up losing. Look at Hitler in Russia. Look at Napoleon. I mean, it just keeps happening. And I think the elite have lost their minds and are imperiling us all. Let's jam in a phone call for constitutional scholar and best-selling author Bruce Fein, also the chief policy advisor to Ron Paul. Let's talk to Rob in California first, listening on 1340 AM KOMY. Go ahead, Rob, there in Santa Cruz.
I want to commend you, Alex, for having Bruce on. Bruce, thank you for being on. I'll be as brief and concise as possible. Now, the listener base of this show and other shows, Coast to Coast, Radio Liberty, we're wondering if we're going to be able to have Ron Paul actually on these shows in an increasing amount, because it doesn't seem like radio, one of the last avenues of platform for freedom and liberty, is really being utilized by the Ron Paul campaign.
Yeah, I don't want, well, you do have Bruce here, and he does them on policy, and I know they've got smart people, very capable in the campaign, but I will say, the last big audiences, I mean, Coast to Coast, 16 million listeners a night. Believe me, I've been on CNN, Fox, no response. Coast to Coast, giant response. Servers crashing. Drudge Report. It's all the alternative media, and I know that's late at night, but yeah. Bruce, what about trying to get Ron Paul on some of the bigger radio shows more? Because they do have bigger audiences. It's not glitzy like Rachel Maddow with 500,000 or Fox with 2 million, but I mean, these are bigger shows.
Well, the difficulty that a candidate confronts, Alex, is what you might call the opportunity cost. Ron's got to choose between influencing the future by making sure he arrives at Tampa with the greatest delegate number, and that's face-to-face activity, campaigning out there and going on a radio or television show that isn't out there face-to-face encouraging.
So what you're saying is he's shifted more to real politics, retail politics on the ground.
With regard to in looking towards August, absolutely, because that's what's really going to give his voice a megaphone there, the greater number of delegates that he has.
Sure.
He's not starry-eyed and thinking that no matter what he preaches, if he shows up with a handful of delegates instead of, say, 4 or 5 or
well, Ron Paul knows a lot more about politics than I do, and I agree with you. I'm not going to second-guess him on that. So I think he knows what he's doing. All right, well, Bruce, stay there. We're going to come back with one more quick segment, jamming a few more calls, maybe do 5 minutes of overdrive, but I know Bruce has got to go, but I should have gone to calls earlier. We'll be right back, and we'll also tell you about his book. In fact, we'll put it up on screen right now for viewers, but radio listeners can go to Infowars.com. We have a link to it. It's American Empire Before the Fall. Bruce Fein. Stay with us. The media will do every trick they can to go after Ron Paul, even having Mustaine supposedly endorse Santorum, which he put a press release out saying I didn't. But they still do what they want. Take a few calls now and a little bit of overdrive with Bruce, but he'll be gone at 5 after. Bruce, what about this subject? This is a question I want to ask just briefly. I know that I saw 3 different packages in the last 6 months of anti-Romney ads run. The last 2 weeks, they've got new ads running. But I keep seeing Politico and everybody saying, Ron Paul's secretly working with Romney, I guess to make him not look, legitimate and look like a sellout. But then I do hear debates and discussions like, well, if they did ask him to be VP, would we want a seat at the table? But I don't see him giving Ron Paul a seat at the table because they know he won't compromise. You're at the highest levels of the campaign as an advisor. Can you let us in on the scuttlebutt, sir?
Well, I think that's just the rumor. That's the child of all political campaigns. Ron has staked out his positions that have not varied for decades. He's not going to compromise those because he understands his ideas that are more important than the individual. And these claims are sort of back channel, sort of a truce between Ron Paul's ideas and Mitt Romney's is just another one of those hoaxes. And you can't imagine more opposites when you read Mitt Romney's cri de coeur for invading Iran today in the Washington Post op-ed, any more people who are opposite with regard to our foreign policy and where we ought to be spending our defense dollars, to protect Americans in America rather than being the policeman of the world. So I think all your audience can be reassured and comforted that Ron Paul's not renouncing any of his fundamental points, no matter what.
And we talked to Lou Rockwell. I've talked to some folks behind the scenes in the Paul campaign. They laughed at it.
Yeah.
But they just keep running it. Oh, Ron Paul sold out. It's all an attempt to stall his support. Another stinking trick. Let's go to Jeremy in Kansas. You're on the air with Bruce Fine. Go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me, Alex?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right. Hey, I'm running for Congress here in 2nd District of Kansas. And I'd like to thank God, you, for Ron Paul and you. I don't know where to start.
That's all right. We don't have a lot of time, though. Do you have a question for Bruce Fine?
Yeah, what's the best advice you could give me?
The best advice I have for you is to say, as you're a member of Congress, unlike the current contingent there, you're going to assert and take account of your responsibilities. You will decide on war and peace. You won't surrender it. You're going to insist on oversight of the executive branch. You won't just do trust me and let the president decide things. You're not going to authorize the president to shower subsidies, money, tarps, everything else on private enterprise to help his friends and destroy his enemies. And you're going to insist that the Federal Reserve Board be accountable like any other institution. Congress should have its oversight as any other institution.
Yes,
and
sir.
It's just outlandish that it can create $1 trillion out of thin air with no congressional authorization or involvement whatsoever.
You're right.
So you say, as you're a member of Congress, you're going to actually make decisions rather than the current invertebrate branch that now surrenders every darn thing to the president.
Let's go to another call. Great points. Powerful points. Diane in Louisiana, quickly. Go ahead. Question for Bruce Fine.
Yes, Mr. Fine, I know you work closely with Ron Paul, and I understand he is a very soft-spoken individual, but I like to see him when he gets ready to come out on that panel, not only say that he's for liberty, but he just needs to pepper it up a little bit and let him know he's against the NDAA and the shutting down of the Internet and the Federal Reserve and TSA. And I wanted to say that the last time Gerald Valente was on there, I agree with everything he said about Ron Paul's need to step it up a little bit.
Well, Ron Paul is working himself to death out there, and he is a gentleman. But when he gets attacked, he'll come back with fire. But, Bruce, we're about to go to break, but 20 seconds on that. Yeah, what about getting Ron Paul, to be a little more vicious, or is he just too gentlemanly?
Well, he's not somebody who's inclined to ad hominem attacks. Maybe you'd like him to be on 20 cylinders when he's on 15.
Stay there. We'll be right back. Stay there. All right, it is the final segment with our guest. I want to jam in a few more calls, but Bruce Fine, Chief Policy Advisor of the Ron Paul campaign, constitutional lawyer, author, is our guest for just 5 more minutes. You got cut off by the break. You were making your point about, people say they want Ron Paul to get in there and attack more. He does attack, but yeah, when he says, I'm the candidate of the Constitution, I'm the guy for liberty, he does do that. I think he is so humble, which is what we need, instead of all those egomaniac narcissists. But at the same time, I would like to see him attack him a little bit more.
I think that maybe we'd like to see him more in a Churchillian mode, if you will, but it wouldn't be Ron Paul. And I think it's the authenticity that attracts so many. And okay, some people just have more natural charisma than others. Start to be a play actor rather than genuine. I think that's going to end up subtracting more enthusiasm than the effort. And
no, I agree with you. It is the fact that, I've met him privately. Some people that know him really well, they say the Ron Paul you see is Ron Paul.
Yeah.
And that's why the system always attacks the authenticity. They hate the genuineness of it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you see perhaps Romney is the most artificial candidate whatsoever. And he attempts to paint himself as just an ordinary guy, owning and mingling with NASCAR owners and making just a little $370,000 a year, and pointing out his wife, drives Cadillacs and the trees are the right size. And I think that hurts Romney because everybody sees he's really out this not because he has any genuine interest in the exercise there. He's trying to maneuver and paint himself in a new image in order to win votes. And
it's not bad that he's rich. It's bad that he tries to act like he's just a blue-collar guy.
Yeah, which is such a joke, and everybody can see right through it. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's gotten so little traction and why, in my view, he's not going to arrive in Tampa with a majority of the delegates. People will still be highly suspect of his authenticity. And that's devastating when it comes to politics. Oftentimes you can get a vote from somebody who may disagree with you, but be totally supportive of your courage and your candor. But he's not getting any of those people because he flips and he flops.
He is a complete weather vane, whichever way the wind blows. Mark in New Hampshire, quick question for Bruce Fine. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I would like to know if Ron Paul does make it, right, and say our military breaks off and goes against Israel, is he going to support it?
Our military wouldn't go against Israel. What do you mean?
Yes, they would. According to the U.S. War College, Dr. Alan Sabrowski, he said that they have proof that Israel did 9/11, and he says if they find out, our military said they would break off. He says, and they would wipe Israel right off the map.
Yeah, you know what? I'll have to look that up. But if there was a War College report, even though there are thousands of different people that write reports for them, if that was actually there, I would have heard about this. Is that new?
No, but I'm wondering why you don't have him on, Alex.
I don't even know who you're talking about, sir. I'm not omnipresent,
But Alex, I think I'd respond. I think Ron Paul has made it quite clear that Israel, like the United States, has a right to self-preservation, and he's not going to lecture them on how they think they need to exercise that. And that's their business. And just like the United States has our understanding of what our security interests are, and we don't want any country try to lecture us about that. And that's why we understand deterrence is what works. And we would incinerate Iran if they attacked us. But
we want the opposite of this global entanglement garbage that George Washington talked about. Why can't we be like Switzerland and neutral and then be wealthy? I mean, people that are neutral are smart.
Yeah, exactly, because they know in the other countries they exploit our empire mentality by letting us pick up the bill and the cost of their defense. I mean, look at Japan, South Korea, wealthy as can be, and we got tens of thousands of troops there defending them against their would-be enemies. I mean, this is crazy. They got to defend themselves. And the fact is, Alex, we have the luxury that we should not overlook of being the most powerful country in the world, and there's nobody who's an existential threat to the United States.
Bruce,
that we should recognize that and say we're inventing goblins out there.
Exactly. Great job, Bruce. Say hi to Ron Paul for us. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.